Before starting this video, I do want to give a thank you to my patrons that support the channel. And if you would like to support the channel, there are some great benefits for you in the link down below. So with that, let's get into today's video. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStompMTG. Today I'm going to go over Hylda of the Icy Crown. This looks like a pretty fun commander that focuses on freezing your opponent's creatures. So for 2, a white and a blue, we have a human warlock. Whenever you tap an untapped creature an opponent controls, you may pay 1. When you do, you choose 1. You create a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature token, or you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control, or lastly you scry 2 then draw a card. So this kind of has everything you want in a commander. It's making a big army for you, buffing them up, and on top of that, if you do need card draw, this is available for you. All at the expense of tapping your opponent's creatures, which there's a lot of ways to do that in this deck. This looks like a pretty fun commander overall. And I feel like in a general sense, all of the 3 witches are pretty good at their niche abilities. With Hylda, for example, you're tapping your opponent's creatures, kind of freezing them in a way. Also with Arit, trying to enchant your opponent's creatures so that you get a benefit of making them lose life and you gaining life. And also with Agatha of buffing up your creatures and stealing activated abilities, especially with her cauldrons. So all of them have pretty unique abilities. Hylda, the Icy Crown, does look pretty promising though, having a really big payoff of making big tokens on the battlefield, buffing them up, and also getting some card draws. So let's get into some of the cards you may want to put in your own deck if you're planning to build Hylda of the Icy Crown. So of course, again, the big focus of this commander is tapping down your opponent's creatures so that you could get the benefit of putting tokens down, buffing them up, and also drawing some cards. So the way we could do that is by having a creature like Dream Shackle Geist. So for 3 mana, it does have flying, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you choose up to 1, tap target creature. Target creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So essentially what this does read is when you do have your commander out on the battlefield, you could tap a target creature, then you could pay 1 to do one of those 3 things your commander does. So Dream Shackle Geist is a pretty good recurable way of doing that. Another great option in your deck is having both partners of Rhoda Geist Adventure and also Timon Youthful Geist. So each of these are both partners. So in this deck specifically, if you put one onto the battlefield, you can search your library for the other one so that you can have it in your hand ready to go. But each of these have a pretty good ability that focuses on tapping your opponent's creatures. With Rhoda, it has that ability whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped. If it isn't declared as an attacker, put a 1/1 counter on Rhoda. Also with Timon, at the beginning of each combat, tap up to 1 target creature, and remind you it's each combat, so your opponent's combat as well. So each time you're tapping somebody's creature, you could pay 1 to do one of those 3 things your commander is doing. I did also want to bring your attention to Tiller Engine for 2 mana. It's a construct. Whenever a land enters the battlefield tapped and under your control, you could choose 1. So this is great use overall. I mean, there's not a whole lot of lands that enter the battlefield tapped on our side. However, when it does happen, this will provide great use for us, either untapping a land we control so that we could get ahead, or if we want to tap a target non-land permanent opponent controls, we could easily do so and use one of our Witch's 3 abilities. So another easy include to add to the deck would be Sleep. So for 4 mana, tap all creatures target player controls. Those creatures don't untap during that player's next untap step. So say for example, they have 5 creatures on the battlefield and they all tapped, and if you do have 5 mana after the sleep effect happened, you can essentially pay all that mana into putting like 5 4/4s on the battlefield with your commander, or drawing 5 cards. Honestly, this is going to be a really good card in the deck for sure. Another card that will provide constant value to us is Blind Obedience. It has that ability, artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So this is a static ability that'll happen no matter what. As long as our opponents are playing creatures, we can constantly pay 1 so that we could put creatures on the battlefield, or we could buff them up, or again, we could draw cards. I do want to reemphasize that as much as I can, because when we do that more and more, we're just going to be getting so much more value when our opponent's creatures are tapped. So Blind Obedience is excellent in the deck. But if we do want to get some value outside of our commanders for our opponent's creatures being tapped, we do have Theft of Dreams and also Borrowing 100,000 Arrows. I never thought I would use that card ever, Borrowing 100,000 Arrows, but here we are. However, both of these are essentially the same thing. You draw a card for each tapped creature a target opponent controls, but they're kind of worded a little different, even though they're exact same thing. I mean, maybe there's a little difference, but I'm pretty sure, 100% sure these are the exact same card, reading the exact same thing, maybe in a little bit of different order. However, you're drawing cards nonetheless. Say, for example, your opponent has like 10 tapped creatures on the battlefield. That's going to be excellent. You're going to be drawing 10 cards out of one of these options. With that said, I did also want to add a little bit of an extra theme in this deck because I don't want to just keep on tapping your opponent's creatures. I did want to talk about having a snow theme in this deck because our commander is the Icy Crown. Of course, we want to have Snow Package in this deck. So, for example, we have Bergstrider. It's not really the best card in the deck, but it is a snow permanent. When it enters the battlefield, tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls. So just that by itself, we're going to get some value out of our commander with Bergstrider. And if we did pay a snow mana, it doesn't untap until the next controller's next untap step. So pretty good to use overall. I mean, it's not the best thing in the world, but it's just more for example in the deck. But I will say Icebreaker Kraken was the main reason why I did want to go with a snow theme, because it does have that ability. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each snow land you control. Also, it does have that ability. It enters the battlefield. Artifacts and creatures target opponent's control don't untap during that player's next untap step. And you can return 3 snow lands you control to its owner's hand. Return Icebreaker Kraken to its owner's hand so that you could reuse that ability, making sure your opponent's creatures don't untap. This is going to be good use, especially when we're tapping our opponent's creatures. They won't untap for an extra turn after that, so that we can kind of swing away when they're uncontested. So I feel like for me, this is going to be a perfect card in the deck. The last card I do want to talk about, as far as the snow package, I didn't really talk too much about snow cards in the deck. I do have a lot more in the deck list down below in the description. However, I did want to talk about Merit Lage's Slumber, mainly because it's 2 mana. Whenever it or another snow permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you do scry 1. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you do control 10 or more snow permanents, you sacrifice this enchantment. If you do, you create Merit Lage, a legendary 2020 black avatar creature with flying and indestructible. So if anything else, I love this card for the fact that if you put a snow land on the battlefield, you get a scry 1, no other stipulation whatsoever. Just the fact that you could put a snow permanent on the battlefield, then scry. And if you do get the 2020 Merit Lage on the battlefield with flying and indestructible, well, good luck to your opponents on winning the game. But that does transition to the next part of the video, is winning the game. There's also some fun interactions that you could do with your commander. So for the first interaction I do want to talk about is with Hylda and also Junkwinder. Both of these synergize very well with each other, mainly because with Junkwinder's ability, whenever a token enters the battlefield under your control, you can tap target non-land permanent opponent controls. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So let's just say, for example, each opponent has 5 creatures on the battlefield and then you tap one of them. Well, what you can do is pay 1 to create a 4/4 elemental creature token on the battlefield. Then Junkwinder will see that. You will tap another creature on the battlefield. Then you can repeat this process by making another 4/4 elemental creature token on the battlefield. Then Junkwinder tapping another creature. As long as you have the mana for it, you can essentially tap all the creatures on the battlefield. And then with all those creatures tapped on the battlefield, you'll have a big army of 4/4s straight on the battlefield that you could swing in next turn. And remember, with Junkwinder's ability, you tap target non-land permanent and opponent controls. It doesn't untap during their controller's next untap step. So with all your 4/4s, you could swing away uncontested unless they played a creature on the battlefield. Another combo I do want to suggest to you is putting Opposition and Ashnod's Altar on the battlefield. This is very similar to the one I talked about previously. However, with Opposition, you could tap an untapped creature you control, tap target artifact, creature, or land. So when you do tap an opponent's creature, you could essentially pay 1 to make a 4/4 creature on the battlefield. Then you could tap that creature you made with Opposition so that you could tap another creature an opponent controls. And then on that response, you could sacrifice that creature to Ashnod's Altar so that you can have the mana to make another token on the battlefield, so you can repeat the process until you tap all your opponent's creatures and you make some 4/4s on the battlefield. So I will say this looks like a fun combo to try in the deck for sure, along with Junkwinder. So with that said, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Hylda of the Icy Crown. I do feel like this is going to be a fun commander overall. Maybe not for your opponents, because your opponent's creatures are going to be tapped always. However, the benefit of getting a 4/4 elemental on the battlefield, also buffing up your army, and also scrying 2, then drawing a card is pretty excellent just off of 1 body alone. Obviously, you have to tap an opponent's creature to get that activated ability happen. But overall, a pretty fun value engine for your commander, especially going into a niche strategy of tapping your opponent's creatures. Most people would rather just kill their opponent's creatures instead of just tapping them because they'll just untap. But if you just keep on tapping them, it's almost like they're removed anyways. So I did want to repeat myself. I do have a deck list down below if you do want to go check it out. There's some cards that are pretty janky with tap themes. If there's any other suggestions you'd want to let me know down below in the comments. I try to read as much comments as I can as I'm going through the day. I love to interact with the community as much as I can too. Also, do you plan on making this commander yourself? Which of the 3 witches is your favorite? I feel like a Reed of the Charmed Apple is my personal favorite out of the 3. So again, let me know down below which one of the 3 witches are your favorite. Also, make sure to break off the ice on that like button and subscribe. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.